DreAllDay.com.
YouTube, what's going on? This is Dre Baldwin, DreAllDay.com. I should say WorkOnYourGame.com. It's been a while, but I decided I'm gonna see if I can get my YouTube game back up. I've really been focused on just building a business these last couple years. Honestly, haven't been paying attention to YouTube, but YouTube can help business too. So let's just see. We want to try it this way. I'll put a thumbnail up here. Got a thumbnail design. I'm going to do this video like this on this whiteboard, explaining this topic. Y'all let me know if y'all like this style. If you want to see me do other styles or more things like this, you have to let me know in the comments. And I'll be looking at the vanity metrics, likes, comments, followers, views, etc. And I'll be looking at the comments. And if those look good, then I'll do more like this. But if it doesn't really get response, then I probably won't do. I might do a few just to see, try a few things out. Gotta give it a little bit of time, and then we'll move on from there. So the topic we're gonna talk about here today is this whole concept, this whole argument that has been going on. It's not really an argument, this talking point that people have been bringing up about basketball skill in basketball. Is this a thing? Is this really a conversation? Is this something that needs to be talked about? The answer is no, this is not a thing, but let me explain to you why. First of all, let's understand that in basketball, there are two things that we need to be paying attention to. Number one is ascension. Ascension means moving up in the game. That means when you first start playing ball, you play in the street or at the playground, then you play at your local rec center, then you play for your high school, your college, and hopefully, if you can, you get to the professional level. So ascension means moving up in the game. And number two is the objective of the game. Anybody know what the objective of basketball is? What's the objective of a game of basketball? You and one of your friends play a game of basketball. What's the objective? If the Knicks and the Lakers play a game, what is the objective? The objective of the game is winning. That is the objective of the game. These are the two things we're focused on. Winning and ascension. Those are the two things that matter in basketball. What has happened over the last, I don't know where exactly this started, but this is something that's happening in all wider society as people are, what they're doing is people are basically changing the definition of words and terms to create new realities. This is what's happening in the world. This is why you have people saying that a boy can be a girl and that a girl can be a boy. This is why you have people changing the definition of what the word vaccine means so that the people who got cajoled and duped and bullied into taking that shot don't feel like they got cajoled and bullied and duped into taking the shot because, well, at least I got the shot because it would have been worse. I know people who had COVID for a damn month and they said, well, good thing I got the shot because it would have been worse. And, okay, whatever. The whole point is, in wider society these days, you have a lot of people changing the definitions of terms and changing what things mean or changing what is the most important thing in a certain area so that they can create new arguments. So the first person I heard talk about this, first person I ever heard saying things like this was several years ago. It was former NBA player Gilbert Arenas. Now, I'm a fan of Gilbert Arenas. I like Gilbert's game. I will watch Gilbert play and see him do a move or do something and say, damn, I wonder if I could add that to my game. And sometimes I was able to add some version of it, maybe the 70% version of how Gilbert did it. But Gilbert was a very good player, very skilled, very talented player. He's the first player I heard on his podcast. I haven't heard it in a while, but when he first came out with that podcast, I would listen to it. Gilbert was a very entertaining and funny guy. And when he would compare players, he would talk about skill. Well, this guy has more skill than this player. And I'd be listening to him talking. I'm like, why the hell does he keep talking about who has more skill? Isn't the purpose of the game to win? And the answer is yes. The purpose of the game is to win. So what I want all of you to understand is that a lot of the things that we do in our daily lives are one thing, but we treat them as another thing. So let me explain to you what I mean by this. And I want you to understand that what I'm about to share with you is something that you can use in all of life. This is not just a basketball topic. Many of the things that we do in life are a means to an end. Does any of you know what that means? Means to an end means the things that we do that are all based on, they are all subservient to the main goals of ascension and winning. So many of the things that we do as entrepreneurs, like posting videos on YouTube, trying to get likes on TikTok, trying to get comments and followers on Instagram, going back and forth with people on Twitter, all of those things are means to an end. Why are they means to an end? Because when you're running a business, what is the main objective? Anybody who runs a business, what is your number one objective or your number one responsibility, let's say? Number one responsibility in business is revenue. Your number one responsibility when you run a business is to make money. So when you do things like posting on, and I'm going to bring this all back to basketball in a second, when you do things like posting to Twitter or IG or TikTok or YouTube or Facebook, all of these are means towards making money. And if doing these things are not leading you to making money, then you shouldn't be doing these things. This is why I told you at the top of this video, I've been spending a lot of my resources over the last couple of years really been focused on building a business which really does not require me to give a damn about any of these apps. Even though I use them, it can be entertainment for me, and yes, it can keep me connected with some people, and every once in a while somebody does filter through from there and they get into my business, but I can do business without doing any of this stuff. That's a different conversation for a different day. But in business, these things are simply a means to an end. These should all be leading to this, and if they're not leading to this, you shouldn't be doing this. In basketball, then, let's take the conversation back to basketball, because I told you that I would. In basketball, means to the end are dribbling, shooting, rebounding, jumping, etc. All the skills that people like to talk about. So when the Gilbert Arenases of the world, or anybody else out there, the ESPN talking heads, or even people like yourselves, get to talking about these things, like this guy has more skill than this guy, or this guy can do this. Or I remember a couple years ago when Giannis won his, I believe it was either the first or second year that he won MVP, and he and James Harden were in a battle. It was basically going to come down to him or James Harden for MVP. And James Harden started saying, well, I think the narrative is against me, and look at what I do versus what he does. You know, all he does is just run full speed to the rim and just dunk on people because he's 7 feet tall and he's strong. That doesn't take any skill. Look what I do. I dribble around and I can do step backs and I do moves. I use more skill than he does. How can you compare my game to his game? When James Harden, and this is very unfortunate because James Harden plays for my hometown team, the Philadelphia 76ers. I like watching James Harden play, but I'm not really a fan of James Harden's his mindset. And that statement is one of the main reasons that he's more first of all, that he's campaigning for an individual award when his team wasn't winning the championship, and his team collapsed in the playoffs that year to the Golden State Warriors. And secondly, because you are trying to make this argument about skill when the whole point of the game is not having more skill than the next player. The whole point of the game is winning more than the next player. That is the objective of the game. The means to the end in basketball is all of this stuff should be leading to winning. Or if you're trying to move up in the game, it should lead to ascension. So when I was playing basketball, I would work on my dribble, my shot, my rebounding, my athleticism, getting in game shape, etc. What was the purpose of me doing all those things? The reason I did all those things is so I could get better and go from playing on the playground to playing in high school to playing in college to playing pro. That was the only reason that I did these things. I didn't do these things so I could get on YouTube and tell you that I was better than this guy or that guy, or so 10 years later when I'm not playing ball anymore, tell you, well, I had more skill than this person. Who the hell cares who has more skill? Only objective, again, if we're talking careers, is how far did you ascend? And if we're talking on a micro level, is did you win the game? Those are the only things that matter in basketball. These two things right here. So for example, I used to post a bunch of basketball videos on YouTube. Maybe some of you watching this know that. And every now and then somebody would ask me, especially when I was actively playing ball, people would always ask me, Dre, who's the better player, you or, and they fill in the name of some other YouTube basketball person, or you better than this guy, that guy, that guy. And then people would start this conversation, or some YouTubers really would entertain this. And I remember years ago, somebody did a video like who are the top hoopers on YouTube, and they did like a rankings list. And I was on the list somewhere, but I wasn't number one on the list, which is inexplicable. And I'll tell you why it's inexplicable that I wasn't number one on the list. Because the only thing that matters when we're comparing player to player, and let me put this on here so everybody can see it. You compare player versus player. There's only one thing that matters. Who did more winning, or who ascended further? That's the only thing that matters. So if you ever ask me, if any of you ever have the question, Dre, who was the better player, you or XYZ YouTuber? It could be somebody who doesn't play ball anymore, who's maybe around my age or older, or somebody who's younger and they're playing ball right now. my answer to the question is compare how far I ascended in basketball to how far that guy ascended in basketball. And you'll have your answer. If they ascended further than me, then you can put them above me and I'll be fine with that. I'll eat that. That's fine. I'll take it. But if I ascended further than them, then they got to eat that. There's nothing else to compare. Now, if we went to the same level, now we can start splitting hairs. But anything other than that, then we can't talk. Like, my basketball career took me to professional basketball playing overseas. I didn't play in the NBA. So if you compare me to some YouTube guy who played in the NBA, then I got to say he's above me. Why? Because he ascended further than me. That's just objectively truthful fact. And we all got to accept that's the fact. Why? Because this is the hierarchy of the game. This is the reason why we play. Anybody who picks up a basketball wants to go to the next level. All right, so we know the levels in playing basketball, right? Let me put that on here just in case anybody doesn't know. So you start playing, right, in the street is level 1. Then you play recreation, let's say, is level 2. Level 3 is school. So that's high school, college. And then level 4 is pro. Now, pro has levels too. So pro, you have overseas and G League. I'll put on the same level because a lot of people who play in the G League could be playing overseas, and a lot of people playing overseas could play in the G League. And then there's money issues, and there's a bigger conversation between overseas and the G League. It's not as cut and dried as one is better than the other, and there's not as many jobs in one as there is in the other. So overseas G League got put on one level, and then you have the NBA is the highest level of basketball. And then in the NBA, if somebody goes to, let's say, the Hall of Fame, that's like an even higher level. So if one guy went to the Hall of Fame, another guy didn't, then the guy who went to the Hall of Fame is the better player. I mean, we just got to go off that because that's subjective. So these are the levels that you can ascend in basketball. So the ascension is this right here. This is the metric that I came up on. So when I was playing ball in the street, I was just trying to get on a local rec team. When I got on the rec team, now let me play for my school. Play for my school. Let me see if I can get from high school to college. Got to college. Let me see if I can get to the pro. Got overseas. Let me see if I get into the NBA. So that's what I was always looking for. And everybody who picks up a basketball, your career is going to end at one of these levels. Not everybody's going to make it all the way to the bottom of the funnel, as we said. Some people are going to get here. Some people will get here. Some will get here. Some will get there. But this is the way that the game works. And we all have to respect this, because if we don't have this objective metric of what we're measuring now, two different people are having two different conversations and we can't agree on anything, and we can't even get on the same page because we're not even reading out of the same book. Everybody following what I'm saying? Speaking of books, this is why the dictionary matters. That's why we need to have clear definitions of words. This is why when people go changing definitions of words, oh, this doesn't mean this anymore. Boy, it doesn't, the woman who got elected to the Supreme Court, she doesn't know what a woman is. You don't know what a woman is anymore. So now we're changing the definitions and we're not even using the same dictionary because people want to change words to make themselves right rather than be accurate. And there's a big difference between being right and being accurate. So if you ask me to compare myself to another YouTuber, I can make myself right by telling you, well, I could do this and this and this and this, everything that puts me above that person. But what's accurate is if I just say this, look at how far I went versus how far they went. We don't have to argue. Right? I don't have to prove myself right. It's not about me serving my ego. All I'm going to do is say, let's look at something that's objective that we can all look at, and it's done. This is the same thing that happens in basketball. So we're talking about this concept of basketball skill. All of these things, Gilbert Arenas, are means to an end. The whole point of getting good at these things is not so you can win MVP awards, James Harden. It is not so you can make the All-Star game. Whoever complains every year when there's an All-Star game, there's a bunch of players complain they didn't make the All-Star game. It is not so you can get any kind of individual accolades. Anybody, Joel Embiid, also from my hometown Sixers, James Harden, campaigning for individual awards. That's not the point. Yes, everybody would love to get these. So listen, I would love to get a whole bunch of individual awards when I play ball, but the object was to win the game. That's the purpose of playing the game of basketball. That's the reason why basketball has a scoreboard. And the biggest difference, I tell people this all the time, between business and sports, the biggest difference is that sports has a scoreboard. And what the scoreboard does is it keeps everybody honest and objective because we are dealing with clear facts. This is the biggest difference between sports and every other aspect of life. And this is why I'm so thankful that I was an athlete. Because coming from the sports world, we had to deal with honest, objective facts. And what is the honest, objective fact in sports? The scoreboard. And when you have a scoreboard, there is nothing to argue about. When you have a scoreboard, you don't have an hour-long podcast episode talking about your skill. When you have a scoreboard, there is no narrative. When you have a scoreboard, it's clear. This team won, this team lost. This guy's the champion, this guy is not the champion. There was someone who said, I believe I was watching a Vlad TV interview. He said he interviewed John Sally. And John Sally tried to say that Scottie Pippen was better than Michael Jordan because Scottie Pippen had this skill and that skill, and he could guard more people, and he could overall kind of do more things than Michael Jordan could do. What John Sally was doing was defaulting to the skill argument. Well, Scottie Pippen has more overall skills than Michael Jordan. And somebody might say, well, LeBron James has more skills than Michael Jordan. Let's remember, folks, we're comparing players, and we'll compare apples to apples. So I'm not saying a role player to a superstar. So let's not say we're not comparing Robert Horry to Charles Barkley, because Charles Barkley was the main dude. Robert Horry was not the main dude. Michael Jordan was the main dude. Scottie Pippen was not the main dude when Michael Jordan was on the team. And when he was the main dude, they didn't win. When Michael Jordan was the main dude, once they started winning, they didn't lose again. Michael Jordan was the main guy, and the reason Michael is still the guy, still number one, better than LeBron, is because this right here, winning. Objective of the game is to win. Yes, dribble, shoot, rebound, jump, score points, get your stats up, make the all-star game, get your little highlights, make your little documentaries about yourself. For every player playing today, will make a documentary about themselves. The object is to ascend and to win. This is the number one skill in basketball: ascending and winning. Not stats, not your individual accolades, not what ability do you have that this other player doesn't have. Because again, the only reason that we develop these abilities, folks, is so that we can use them to ascend or to win. If you have a bunch of abilities, a bunch of skills, yet you are not using them to achieve the objective, factual outcome that the business is based on, ascension or winning, then your skills are being wasted. You are a waste of ability. That's what you actually should be calling yourself. Gilbert Arenas. I'm not saying Gilbert Arenas is a waste of ability. I mean, he made the All-Star game. He made a bunch of money playing. He scored a bunch of points. I'm a fan of Gilbert Arenas. I'm not a fan of the argument of skill. And any of you who's in business, for example, if you're running a business and you got a bunch of followers on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, you're getting a bunch of comments and engagement and followers and subscribers, yet this stuff is not leading to revenue. What are you doing with all that? What are you doing with all that skill? You're developing what we call empty calories. Empty calories is like eating a candy bar. A candy bar tastes good in the moment when you eat the candy bar, but you know that when it's time to eat dinner, you're not going to get a whole bunch of Snickers and Twizzlers and Skittles and call that dinner, right? Everybody logically understands that. That's exactly what people are doing when they talk about the numbers you can put up on these apps. We call these vanity metrics, but it's not actually leading to revenue in your business. Or a basketball player is talking about their vanity metrics, your stats, and how much skill you have, yet is not leading to your team winning basketball games. But then when somebody asks you about how you're doing, you start talking about your vanity metrics instead of talking about the actual objective metric. This is how the whole skill argument has come in. This is because people are fighting against the dictionary, fighting against things that are honest, objective, and based in fact. All right, and this is why there's a big difference between being right versus being accurate. These are two different things. Being right is about serving your ego. It's about argument. It's about narratives. And it's about perspective. That's what being right is about. You ever catch yourself in an argument with another person? This is what you're doing. You're trying to serve your ego. You're arguing. You have a narrative. They have a narrative. You have a perspective. They have a perspective. You can argue with a person and probably never come to a conclusion because you both have different ideas and you're probably just quote unquote agree to disagree. Any of you have got an argument and ended that way, or just ended in y'all being angry at each other? Being accurate, on the other hand, is about a target outcome, an objective measure, is about facts, and it is no ego involved. How is this? Let me give you an example. If we're playing on who was I listening to? Yesterday I was listening to an interview I was listening to was Gary Payton was being interviewed on Vlad TV. He talked about when he was with the Miami Heat in 2006, the year they won the championship, that he called a team meeting. Gary Payton called a team meeting, and he said to the players on the team, look, we all got to start playing our role. And Gary volunteered first and said, look, I'm not that dude anymore that I used to be back in the day. I'm not the main dude anymore. So I know my role is I got to just lock up on defense, handle the ball, and when I'm open, make a couple open shots every game. I'm going to get like 10 to 14 points. That's pretty much what I'm going to do. I'm going to get 8 to 12 points. That's pretty much what I'm going to do. Everybody else got to fall in line and play their role. And he said most of the people on the team accepted that, but one person wasn't really with it. It was Shaquille O'Neal. And that Shaq kind of wasn't with that everybody got to play their role thing, because Shaq still was carrying himself like he was the dude on that team. And Gary Payton said this in the interview. He called Shaq aside and said, yo, the dude right now is this kid right here. He was referring to Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade is the dude. We all got to get in line behind him. He's the main dude. If we get behind him, we can win this championship. And he got Shaq to get on board with that, and the Miami Heat won the championship. Dwayne Wade averaged like 35 points a game in the NBA Finals. Because why? Shaq at that time, before Gary Payton said what he said to Shaq, Shaq was referring to his ego. He was arguing against what was going on. He had his own narrative in his own mind. He had his own perspective that he wanted to prove himself right. There's another thing that happens when you're trying to be right is you're trying to prove yourself. Anytime you're trying to prove yourself, you're trying to be right. Because when you're trying to prove yourself, you're serving your ego. And it usually leads to argument. You create a narrative and you're trying to hammer in your perspective and prevail with your perspective. When you're being accurate, on the other hand, there's a clear target outcome. When there's a clear target outcome, nobody has to be right. Because what are we going to do? All we're going to do is say, well, I got my perspective, you got your perspective. Let's say me and you are business partners. We're doing a business deal together. And you say, Dre, this is what we need to do. We need to focus on posting on Instagram. And I say, well, I don't like using Instagram. I want to post on TikTok. And you say, no, we're supposed to Instagram. And I say, no, it's TikTok. And we're going back and forth, both trying to serve our ego, arguing about TikTok versus Instagram. If we are trying to be accurate, and if a cooler head prevails in this conversation, one of us should be smart enough to say, hey, let's both stop trying to be right and let's try to be accurate. Because what is our goal? If we're in a business deal, what's our goal in business, folks? I say it all together, class. Revenue. Our goal is to make money. So I will say, hey, wait a minute. Why don't we both stop trying to serve our ego and let's focus on what matters, which is the target outcome, which is making money. So why don't we test what works? Let's test on Instagram. We'll test on TikTok, and we'll look at the stats from both of them. Whichever one is producing more revenue, that's the one that we're going to do. And you're going to say, Dre, that's a damn great idea. You're a genius. I'm going to say, I know I'm a genius. So now let's focus on our target outcome, which is making money. We have an objective measure, which is making the money. We are dealing with the facts because we're looking at the stats of what works and what doesn't. And it's not about anybody's ego. So if it turns out that my idea was the right one, great. If it turns out your idea was the right one, great. Because guess what? Either way, we both win because the objective is making money. So I'm telling you all of this. I'm kind of giving you all a business lesson at the same time. I'm not talking about basketball here. And this is what I tend to do. So those of you who don't know me, this is what I do. Basketball skill, this is not the target, folks. This is. If you're a player and you're talking about your career, this is your target. Now, you use these skills to do this. This is a means to an end. Everybody needs to understand that. Many people do things that are means to an end, and they claim that they're trying to get to the end, but what you end up doing is using the means and they become your end. In other words, this is like a person who decides to become a drug dealer, and they say, well, I don't see any other options to make money, and I can't get a job, and no jobs pay any money. So you know what? I'm going to become a drug dealer for enough time that I can make enough money to move out the hood, get myself a nice living, and then I'm gonna stop drug dealing and I'm going to legit business. The problem is the high from drug dealing gets them, they get so good at drug dealing, or they love the rush of making that money so much. I don't mean the high like literally taking the drug, selling the drug, that they forget that they meant to get out of it, that they were just using that as a go-between between point A and point B. Then they get to the point that they can get out, but they can't get out because they get so used to the means that they forget about the end. And then they stay in the drug game, and then they go out of the game one of two ways: in a box, either in the jail cell or in a coffin. That's what happens to a lot of people. I'm just using that as an example. This is what's happened to a lot of basketball players in this skill argument, that the means is develop the skill so you can ascend and you can win. But what happens is people forget about ascending and winning, and they start focusing on the means, which is developing the skill. And then you start talking about the skill as if that was the goal. Developing the skill is not the goal, folks. Developing the ascension, moving up, is the goal, and winning is the goal. If you're not doing these two things, you are not respecting your business. You need to know what your ends are, and you should know what your end is before you start. Any of you, I'm a person who in my business, I help people with mindset, strategy, systems, and execution. One of the key things in strategizing, folks, is you have to know what your goal is. You gotta know what your target is. Where are you actually trying to get to? Many people, athletes, basketball players, business people, entrepreneurs, and influencers, go out here and you start doing things as a means to an end, but you forget about the end and you just keep doing the means, and you're like, all right, when does this actually end? Well, the good news is it doesn't end. Well, actually, that's the good news for these apps right here, the Twitters, the Instagrams, the YouTubes, the Facebooks, is that because you don't know how to get out of the game, you got to stay in the game, because that's the only way you can make money. Now they own you. You don't own them, they own you. And this is a bigger conversation. I'll have a different day on a different subject when I got more space on the whiteboard, because as you can see, I've used all this up. But this is the basketball skill argument. Hopefully I've made my point clearly enough for everybody here to understand it, that basketball skill is not the goal in basketball. Skill is a means to the end of being an ascending and winning basketball player. Look at the best players who have done the most winning. Did they have skill? Yes, they did. But understand that the only reason that they developed skill is so they could get better at winning, not just to say that they had skill. All right, we're not looking for empty calories here. We're looking for whole foods. All right, I love candy too. I'll eat candy bars and Skittles and Twizzlers, but I understand that when it's time for me to eat lunch or dinner, I'm eating whole foods. I'm eating a balanced meal with a protein, a starch, and a carb. I'm not eating Twix and Skittles for dinner and calling that dinner. That's what a lot of people are doing when they're talking about basketball skill, as if that's the point. That is not the point. So with all that being said, folks, I think I made my point clearly enough here. Text me to get my daily motivation message free of charge every day. My number's right there. It's 305-384-6894. Send out every day to your phone. My next live event is called Work on Your Game Live. It's happening February 3rd and 4th down here in Miami. That is a business event covering mindset, strategy, systems, execution. Get your ticket at workonyourgame.live. That link's down below in the description. And if you want to take the next step to working with me, I'll give you 2 of them. If you are a basketball player, go to hoophandbook.com. That's where my basketball training programs are at. If you are a business person, business professional, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's where you can get access to all my courses. You can see what my coaching programs are about, and we can take the next step, getting your game where it needs to be on the business side of things. Everybody work on your game. If y'all like this, let me know. I'll do more of these. Work on your game. We out of here. Dre all day.